This is the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. Well, one of the things we found out on our trip through Europe was that the U.S. innovates, China duplicates, and now the EU regulates. Mr. Reid, I have a question for you first. Reports estimate that complying with the EU's Digital Markets Act, the DMA, could cost American companies up to $1 billion every single year. That's not just a number on a page. Those costs ultimately fall on American workers, who will see fewer jobs, on consumers, who will face higher prices and fewer choices, and on entrepreneurs, who will have a harder time competing against subsidized foreign rivals. Mr. Reid, is it correct that these compliance costs affect our economy? And what does it mean for America if Europe is allowed to impose these kind of costs on U.S. innovation?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. The more detailed answer is that, unfortunately, Europe has taken an ex-ante approach to regulation. The United States has always done well with an ex-post. As a small business entrepreneur, I actually want fraud to be gone after. I want deceptive practices to be reduced. But unfortunately, what we see in the EU is an ex-ante process that ups my compliance requirements without actually giving customers the certainty of the result. So it's absolutely raising costs, and for American developers, we see one of the largest problems is how do you get to those European customers if the first tranche you hit is paying a compliance lawyer to meet all of these tests?
Thank you. Mr. Price, our Federal Trade Commission Chairman Ferguson has warned that government regulation can stifle, obviously, competition and innovation, and in many cases, the government itself becomes the most dangerous of all the monopolies. Isn't it the DMA, is the DMA a perfect example of that? It kind of weaponizes and makes it burdensome with regulations. Can you give me your comments on the DMA and what do you think the status is right now?
I certainly agree that European regulation generally slows down competition. It creates a situation whereby companies are unable to innovate with any degree of speed because they're constantly looking over their shoulder towards regulators around compliance. DMA, a very good example of that. Not just the DMA, though. Of course, you have the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. You have the DSA, the Digital Services Act, and constantly more and more being added. It's been estimated in the digital market space alone since 2016. 30 pages of regulation existed at the time. We're now over 1,000 and growing. So the European Union's response to American innovation is more and more regulation, generally around nebulous concepts like safetyism and protecting consumers, but very often just, particularly with the DSA, to create, unfortunately, a censorship industrial complex, as I outlined. DMA, very good example of that as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reid, if I could come back to you, President Trump just secured a landmark commitment from the EU to address unjustified digital trade barriers. It was part of the U.S.-EU trade deal. I'm hopeful that this will result in the EU kind of removing, and a lot of people we talked to in Europe when we were there said that there was a possibility that they could pull back on some of this. What action could President Trump take to hold the EU accountable to their commitment? And are there additional enforcement tools that Congress could provide to make that happen?
Well, I think, Congressman Fitzgerald, you've done great work in reaching out and sending letters to make it clear what the position of the United States government is on these issues. The reality is that the Europeans themselves, through the Draghi report, are recognizing that they have done a lot to harm those very same industries. We're hopeful that the United States can continue to use the careful power and the careful discussions through our trade negotiations and other actions to get them to step back. But we're here to talk about free speech, and so one of the things I would point out is we want the small businesses in Europe to also be able to speak and say, hey, we need these regulations pulled back.
So just to follow up to that then as well, a 2024 staff report by the Housing Oversight Committee found that FTC Chair Lina was using taxpayer dollars to send agency quote-unquote liaisons to the EU to assist with the implementation of the Digital Markets Act. Mr. Reid, do you think it's appropriate for that type of consultation or for the use of taxpayer dollars to help a foreign country implement laws that unfairly discriminate against U.S. companies?
Well, we don't think taxpayer dollars should ever be used to unfairly discriminate against United States companies. We're hopeful that U.S. taxpayer dollars can be used to ensure open markets around the world and a safe environment for our entrepreneurs to succeed.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the